exhausted, but the county is worth it. Left at 3 o'clock this morning from
And call the meeting to order. I've asked Mr. Riddick if he would say our prayer and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
All right, let's pray. Our Father in heaven, Father, we thank you so much for another day of life. Thank you so much, dear Lord, that you even allow us to come and pray to you, dear Lord, and bring our needs and requests to you. Father, I just pray for this country, dear Lord. I pray you have your hand upon us. Please protect our men and women in uniform, dear Lord. I just pray you'll be with each and every one of them. Protect all our... I just pray you just have your hand upon this county, dear Lord. I thank you so much for everyone that's here this morning, dear Lord. I just pray that you'll help us and just turn this into a great, productive meeting, dear Lord. I pray for each and every board member, Father, that we can just come together to make the best decisions for Bradford County. Thank you again for everything you do for us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, before we get started this morning, I do have one item that we will walk on, and that will be under Mr. Cornegay's section a little later on. All right. First thing we have is public comment. And first one I have is Susan, is it Laraway? Laraway, sorry. Ma'am?
I've never done this before.
Oh, okay. All you have to do is
A newbie.
just state your
Susan
name
Laraway.
and your address, and then you'll have 3 minutes.
Okay, Susan Laraway, 4678 Southeast 3rd Ave. I'm addressing the retention pond on Southeast 3rd Ave next to my home. It overflows, it cannot contain their excessive water, rainfall, and it overflows into my home. And basically the whole street becomes one with the retention pond. My home has a lower part to it, but when the house was built, they designed a drainage with a tube that goes underneath my shed into where the property is now, the retention pond. I've never had a problem with flooding. That's why the home was designed that way, until the retention pond was put in the first time, and the first time it flooded was during Irma. And I got assistance from FEMA for that, and no problem. Mr. Riddick came out and they redid the pond for me, and we hadn't had a problem, but they had to keep coming out. And the last time it rained on May 22nd, we had 2 days of really excessive rain, and the water level rose so high that the retention pond literally became one with my home and my neighbor's home, and I have a basement downstairs, which is a bedroom and an office. And that got 3 inches of sitting water that we could not get out because there was no place to drain the water out. And I'm positive this will happen again, sadly, and I just am asking the county to please fix this somehow. Extra drainage, I believe it needs to go somewhere so that it will not come in my home. It incurred an expense of, almost $4,000. I'm not asking for that back. That's, I understand things happen. I just don't have the money to fix it again if it happens. And it will happen. The pond is not working properly. I don't think the engineer did the right thing or something, but I really need help with that. And as soon as possible, it'd be good, because every time it rains, we're scared. We have a basement that we cannot finish now. I can't make a room out of it. It was my daughter's room, and I can't do anything with it. And I've done everything that I can as a homeowner to protect myself, but this pond is, it's not working in a nutshell. Am I 3 minutes?
Yes.
Sorry, I've never done this before.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
So
Okay.
hopefully, hopefully you guys can help me out. Like I said, we've never had a flooding problem until the pond was there, and it's not working. It's not performing the way it should. Even, with my low point, I've never had flooding until the pond literally overflowed, got too high and overflowed into my home and the street. So that's what I'm here for. I thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I just make just one comment? Because Mrs. Larway didn't mention it, but the pictures in front of you are the pictures of the pond in her house. And also the letter that says to whom it may concern, that's from one of the citizens, one of her neighbors. I will say this, the county, I know, has spent, I believe, $10,000 to have an engineer go out there, design this pond again, and for the second time. And the road department went out there and redug it, did everything the engineering firm, said to do. So at this point in time, we've even gotten with the water management, trying to see if we can make it an aquifer recharge area, but there's not enough water going to it for them to spend that kind of money. So that's one option that's out. So again, Mrs. Larway has, been very, very nice. I just wanted to get this to the board's attention, see what we can do to help, and, and go from there.
Okay. Well, I'm sure Jason will take a look at it or see what and if there's anything we can do. And, do we know who actually put it in? Do we know who's responsible for it?
Well, the pond was actually put in, because she bought her home, I think, in 2000, 2003.
1,000.
And the pond was put in 2009, I believe, is when the pond was put in, because another house was flooding. So, not hers, but a different home. So that's when the pond was put in, and then a reverse effect here on Mrs. Larway.
I'm sure they'll follow up on that and see what we can do.
Okay, it's
Okay?
becoming urgent, so I thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Mr. Still.
Paul Still, 14167 Southwest 101st Avenue. I'm also going to be talking about water, primarily Lake Sampson, levels, and also the Cypress Run boat ramp. The rain that we got is should be a real wake-up call for us. We're getting a lot of water coming through the system. Lake Sampson is right at the edge of flood stage. And I just looked it up. The difference that all three gates are open on Lake Sampson, and the difference in level between Lake Sampson and County Road 225 is 1 foot, 1.46 feet. And what this is telling us is that the plants at the edge of Lake Sampson, where it drains into the Sampson Canal, are restraining flow to the point that you cannot lower Lake Sampson by opening the gates. Lake Sampson is continuing to rise, which would be expected because we have a lot of water coming in, but we can't get the water out. And until those plants are removed, it's going to be very difficult to get the water out. So that one of the keys to avoiding flooding is to be able to lower the lake level prior to storms coming in, and we don't have that option anymore. So I would urge you to take some action to make sure that something can be done there. I think the other thing we need to be looking at is the things like the problem that just came before you. And there's potentially some interesting, I think, ways of looking at that, and aquifer recharge would be one of them. If you have a pond like that, let's make it leakier, and you can do that by simply putting in a shallow drainage well, because usually those ponds have a layer of clay. You break through that layer of clay and you get down to the sandy layers, it'll essentially drain and recharge the aquifer. This would require some permitting, but hopefully we could convince Swanee River to do that. And I'll be bringing this up at the Soil and Water Conservation District later on today to see whether we should pursue actions like that. And the other thing I wanted to talk to you about is the Cypress Run boat ramp. I'm afraid we're going to lose the opportunity to do a really good boat ramp there, because the boat ramp that's designed is going to be almost impossible to permit. And I'd urge you to go to your other engineer and have them give you some advice as to whether they think the permit that's being put forward, the designs can be permitted. And it's way overly designed. I mean, a big part of the parcel then gets used up as a storm retention pond. Well, water retention pond. These become real nightmares for management. And so if you just take out the impervious parking, you don't have to have that. And the real issue is digging a new canal, because that's going to require what's called a Program 404 permit, which are very difficult to get. And also, one of the criteria is that you can't have an alternative way of dealing with dredging a canal. And you've got an alternative canal already in existence at Cypress Run. All that needs to be is cleaned out and the vegetation removed. So I'd urge you to get a second opinion before. What happens if the current plans go forward, they can't be permitted, then the money is just simply lost.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. I will say, just in a little response very shortly, Mr. Steele, about that. This is something, of course, it's very, very important to me. And every time you bring it up, I do check. And so I'm told that we're in good shape. And I'm hoping that they know what they're talking about, because, like I said, this is a very, very important thing to me.
Madam Chair, if I may, Mr. Dodds would like to speak and address this, if that's all right with you.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah, concerning some of Mr. Steele's questions and concerns, I'm not an engineer, but I am constantly in contact with the engineers, the current engineer that designed this. There's probably going to be some things that change when we go to construction, where we'll revise it, just as he spoke about the retention pond. You know, there's open course asphalt that can be used with an aggregate underneath to remove that retention pond. So there's things like that that we are looking at, but we'll have to have funding before we can move forward to that point.
What about the canal, Jason?
The current canal that is there is what they are considering dredging, not a whole new canal.
So the notion
Existing.
of there being a new canal is a false one.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It would be the use of the existing one.
Excellent. No,
We'll talk about it later, Mr. I just wanted to make sure that you were aware. We do check into this when you bring it up. So, okay.
Thank you.
thank you.
All right. And I say that because we've got a full agenda and we have a meeting afterwards, so it is a very busy morning. Next, Ms. Mosley.
Carol Mosley, 10121 Southwest 104th Avenue in Graham. Good morning, Commissioners. Change is inevitable, but it doesn't have to be traumatic if we acknowledge what's coming and plan ahead. Right now, we're working on updating our regulations on mining, but we are coming due to update many other aspects of our comprehensive plan as well. I hope we'll do what Commissioner Spooner has asked and hold strategic planning workshops in preparation for making changes to our regulations. We have to decide what we want more of and what we want less of. What has worked and what has failed to serve the best public interest. What needs have gone unmet that must be addressed in the future. Our comp plan update is about envisioning the next 7 to 10 years ahead. Technology is moving fast, and predictions for artificial intelligence indicate that as many as 30% of work hours could be taken over by AI. Low to medium wage jobs will be most affected. The thought on countering those losses is that creativity and human interaction is the wave of the employment future. Machines can learn from what we know, but they can't think creatively about designing a future. And nobody wants a hug from a robot when they're sad or a medical consultation with an automaton when they're sick. But rote work and routine jobs are those most likely to be replaced by AI. Our Regional Planning Council has a comprehensive economic development strategy for our area from 2023 to 27. The handbook has information about trends in every important aspect looking forward. They have data that show us how our region is doing in various areas and goals and objectives for future possibilities. It says, quote, "Unlike many other regions of the state, North Central Florida does not have beaches or theme parks, though it has a growing nature and ecotourism base that takes advantage of the abundant presence of springs and rivers that flow through the region," end quote. Ecotourism feeds into agro-tourism, scientific tourism, and other types of low-impact tourism. The document points out that, quote, "The region is rapidly becoming known as an innovation center," end quote. Amazing technology is taking place in farming with the ability for precision in watering and fertilizer application. We need our young people to be exposed to the exciting future that education can offer. What if we had an innovation hub here in Bradford that focused on studies and developments in agriculture, ecology, robotics, and the future of jobs in those areas? What visitors might bring money to spend while they innovate? Yet we also need to provide opportunities for developing skills for hands-on skills that give us carpenters, electricians, and mechanics. One objective in the Planning Council's economic plan is to, quote, "expand options for high school students to become industry certified while still in high school as an alternative to college path," end quote. The 4 A's of tourism are attraction, accommodation, accessibility, and amenities. If we plan carefully, we can bring a future to Bradford County that provides a good economy while caring for our natural resources at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving right along, we have approval of the consent agenda.
I make a motion we approve this consent agenda.
All right, we have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right, we'll go ahead and vote then. Mr. Riddick?
Aye.
Mr. Daugherty?
Aye.
Mr. Thompson?
Aye.
Ms. Spooner?
Aye.
And Andrews, aye. 5-0. All right. And now we have the presentation of the audit report by Mr. Zach. I'm sorry. How do you, James Moore?
No, ma'am. Item 4 is the clerk report.
Okay,
Dana's gonna come up and I'll present next year's budget.
okay. So number 4 is not, we're not doing number 4?
Yeah, well, this is first.
Okay, well, mine's different then, okay. Thank you. All right, clerk's report. You ready, Dana?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Good morning, Board. Before you is a spreadsheet, actually 2 spreadsheets. I'm going to be reviewing the before balancing.
Can we turn you up just a little bit?
What's that?
There we go.
This one. I'll try to speak loudly.
Okay.
The first spreadsheet is the before balancing at 10 Mills. That's what's on the screen up here. So this is a spreadsheet that condenses all anticipated revenue and expenditures for fiscal year 23-24. This includes revenue at 10 Mills. Right now, you have anticipated revenue of $28.9 million and anticipated expenditures of $45.7 million. These numbers include all restricted funds that must use their fund balance. I have extracted the restricted funds to give you a better look at your core departments. So on the screen up here, I'm gonna just zoom in on the ones at the top. Without the restricted funds, you have anticipated revenue of $27.1 million. and anticipated expenditures of $33 million. Based on instructions received during last year's budget cycle, I have taken the liberty of using all estimated fund balance amounts as of 9/30/23 for each department. That's the two columns here. These estimated fund balance amounts came directly from the third quarter update I presented at your July 20th meeting. With that in mind, you are left with a deficit of $2.5 million. I believe your actual deficit will only be $1.8 million, which I will explain later when I address Fund 106. Your option for addressing this deficit is to balance with transfers from the general fund. And I believe Ms. Amanda has provided you with detailed budgets of each fund. This is where you can see budgeted revenues and budgeted expenditures in detail for each fund. We will be focusing on the top section of this spreadsheet, as I have already balanced all of the restricted funds at the bottom. On the far right of the spreadsheet, you will see either an asterisk or BAL in red. The budgets that have been marked with BAL on the spreadsheet are ones I have already balanced due to various circumstances. For instance, SHIP, which is Fund 102, requires an estimated $130,000 transfer from the general fund to stay in compliance with the use of grant funding. We are only allowed to use 10% of grant funds for administrative expenditures, which run about $115,000 per year, plus the $15,000 deficit from fiscal year 23. This makes the $130,000 transfer, which I have already included on the spreadsheet. So on the transfers, this $130,000 is going to the SHIP department, and I've deducted it from the general fund here. It's part of the $583,000 negative amount on the general fund. Let's look at the library. This is Fund 104. This is the board-funded account. It is advisable to continue the $415,000 transfer from the general fund to maintain the current state aid funding level. So I've taken $415,000 from the general fund and added it to the library. Mosquito control is Fund 112. This is already balanced with a transfer of $38,893 from the general fund. This is for a state grant that requires 100% match. So those three funds have already been balanced. The individual budgets you will need to focus on have been marked with an asterisk. Next to the asterisk, you will see the amount that needs to be balanced. For instance, the general fund reflects a surplus of $11.3 million that can be transferred out to other funds. About halfway down, the road department reflects a deficit of $149,000. We have already used $1.5 million of their fund balance. So your only option is a transfer from the general fund. So in order to balance this $149,000, we will add $149,736 to the road department, and we're going to take it away from the general fund. Our transfers are still zero, net to zero, and the road department is now balanced. Okay, so next we have the fines and forfeitures. This is Fund 106. Currently, it reflects a deficit of $8.8 million. This includes taking care of the negative fund balance of $34,000 from the current fiscal year. I want to just make a note here. According to the Sheriff's 2023-2024 budget cover letter, their budget total is $8,433,898.66, which includes $110,821.82 for emergency management and $703,000 in state funding. I have excluded the amount for emergency management, as has been our practice since the sheriff took over the operations. However, the $703,000 is currently included in their budget request in Fund 106. When I asked Colonel Smith about this, he said we are intentionally wanting to the initial budget to show the actual budget numbers to give the BOCC a full and complete picture of the budget. We will adjust the numbers as needed during subsequent discussions on the fiscal year 24 budget. I believe, based on how it was handled last year, the board should not fund that portion of the sheriff's request. Those funds come to the board as pass-through monies, and as soon as we receive them, we send them to the sheriff. So for now, I will list the $703,000 as a suggested change to expenditures per finance. This brings the deficit in Fund 106 down to $8.1 million, which also brings the overall deficit down to 1.8, whereas it was 1.5. This is what I had referenced earlier. So we need a transfer from the general fund of the $8.1 million. Gonna add that to Fund 106 and take it away from the general fund. Our transfers still net to zero, and fines and forfeitures is now in balance. Next, we have the 8th Judicial Fund. This is Fund 108. It currently has a deficit of $220,000. This includes taking care of a negative fund balance of $81,000. The transfer from the general fund should not be quite so large next year, because we won't have a negative fund balance. Also, a few meetings ago, you took action to increase an ordinance from $15 to $30, which should help with this fund in the future. So we need to transfer $220,000 into the 8th Judicial. We'll take it away from the general fund. Our transfers are still net to zero, and the 8th Judicial is now in balance. Next is the Fire Rescue Fund. They currently have a deficit of $3.8 million, and this was after using the fund balance they had of $628,000. So we'll do a transfer from the general fund for the $3.8 million. We'll take that away from the general fund. Our transfers are still netting to zero, and Fire Rescue is now in balance. Finally, we have solid waste. This is Fund 113, and it currently has a deficit of $814,068. And if you'll remember last year, when we used all of the available fund balance to help balance this fund, it is now down to a fund balance of $188,709, which we have used. If no other revenue sources are attained, next year, you can expect the contribution from the general fund to be around $1 million. So this year, they need $814,000. Gonna add that to solid waste and take it from the general fund. And that is not right. That is right. Second guessing myself. Okay, so our transfers are still netting to zero, and solid waste is balanced. As you can see, we have a deficit of $1.8 million in the general fund after making all of the necessary transfers. We still have an estimated fund balance of $15.4 million. I'm going to move that over as if we are using it. Then we will see what is left over to be placed in your reserve for contingency. So you have a balance of $13.5 million to be placed in reserve for contingency. So now we have all funds are balanced. All of your net transfers net to zero, and you have a reserve for contingency of $13.5 million in your general fund. For comparison purposes, in your final budget for fiscal year '23, your reserve for contingency was $11.4 million. This is a $2.1 million increase over last year. So you have more in your reserve for contingency this year than you did last year. So it has been brought to my attention that you may be interested in seeing what a 5% across the board raise might look like. An estimated $140,000 would be added to expenditures, and your new reserve for contingency would be around $13.4 million. So I can show you that if you wish.
You said that's 5%?
I can show you. So I would add $140,000 to the expenses and take it away from the reserve for contingency. So this includes the 5% across the board raise.
Madam Chair, and Ms. LaFollette, our recommended amount of the fund balance that our clerk and you all recommend is what?
With or without the raises?
With?
With the raises, it looks like it will be $13.4 million.
Okay, so I'm saying annually, there's a certain amount of the fund balance that's recommended that we keep in reserve. What is that?
What percentage are we required to keep?
I'll have to get back with you on
Okay,
that.
no problem. I'm sorry. Okay, all right. One last question, and I'll leave you alone. So the 13.5, is that the 13.566785 would be
So
our
your-
current fund balance without the raise?
That's right.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, the second sheet says balancing after with and mills. That does not include the $140,000 for raises.
Okay.
Okay, all done?
Any other questions?
No, just a comment. I think that, this looks much better. I think we could probably, if we really go back and kind of table our budgets and look, that we might could do a little better. Maybe we can find some areas to cut. Now, grants, how does grants play into this?
Grants are going to increase your overall budget, but they're in and out money. So right now, your budget is, your total expenditures is $47 million. It's gonna go up by whatever the grant amount is.
Okay. Okay. Just hopefully we can find some more cuts, and the next one will be even closer. We can, if we really, really try.
Can
If everybody really, really tries. So, but, hey, I'm happy that it's much lower, so thank you for the work you do.
Madam
Sure.
Chairman, I just wanted to ask real quick, talking about the grant and the Cypress Run boat ramp.
Uh-huh.
We haven't received any payment back of the 50/60. We're in deep on that thing, regarding the grant. We haven't seen any monies to the county so far on the design component.
Okay. Do you know?
Yeah, we're still waiting on DRMP to finalize their design piece before we can submit for reimbursement.
All right.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
back to your point about the cuts. Also, we've discussed this as a board. The previous board discussed it. Until we look at the fire assessment, until we look at franchise fee, until we look at the solid waste assessment, you know, the EMS, there's all sorts of fees that we don't collect that other counties do collect. Again, that's why we're sitting at 10 mills. And so to move forward in this direction, it's, I would consider somewhat the cart before the horse, but I'm just throwing this out there to the rest of the board that if we don't take action on these items, next year's gonna be worse. And we have got to figure out how we're gonna increase revenue streams for this county. And that's the only way to do it. So, they're tough decisions, but the pain has been prolonged long enough. And until we make adjustments, then we're gonna continue to have this pain, whether it's for this board or whether it's for the next board.
You're absolutely right, I agree. We have had discussions. I've had discussions with Mr. Cornegay about different ways to fund fire. We've got to, and like you said, it is gonna be painful, but the county has held off for as long as they can possibly hold off. It is time that we're gonna have to, if we can't do the franchise fee, then there'll be assessments that will be looked at. And just hope that everybody understands, in order for us to have fire and rescue and have all the different amenities that we have, it does take money. And so we are discussing that, and we will be bringing it before the board very soon. So,
And Madam Chair, if I could, just before you get over to the sheriff, for the last 2 years, I've compared everything to Baker County. They were the same size as us, and they're at 6 mills, somewhere around 8.5 mills. But they have a fire assessment. They have franchise fees on all 3 utilities in the county, Clay Electric included. And they also have double the solid waste assessment we have.
Yeah.
So I mean, those fees were set at a rate, the solid waste assessment. And I don't know when the last time that was ever addressed, but
our
you know it
solid
cost
waste?
double whatever it did whenever that was originally.
Are you talking about our solid waste?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I think it was it 87?
1986, I believe, 86 or 87.
Was-
Now, a lot of that was even landfill closure. They were trying to close the landfill out at Keystone at the
Yeah.
time. So that needs to be revisited as well. We might be able to
Yes.
get down to 8.5 mills.
And that's exactly, we've been discussing both of those, because we know we're way behind. So, just so the board knows that, you know, I mean, we want to be as good to our constituents as we can, but there comes a time to when we have to do something in order to balance the budget.
And Madam Chair, it goes without saying too, that, you know, with the Amendment 2 passing, with the increase in the $15 an hour, the compression rate, the overall cost of living, inflation, fuel, equipment, just the cost of providing services has gone up tremendously. And again, I've said it before, revenues are here and expenditures are here.
Right.
And so until we can balance that out or get closer to it, we'll continue to have the pain, and at some point, the pain will be a really big problem.
Go ahead.
Just to go back and just to ask the question, so right now, since we haven't gotten any reimbursements for the grant, so once that is, then that would be figured into the balance that we would.
It would go back in general fund, where it's
go
been
back to
paid out
general
of so
fund.
far.
That would be about 60,000.
Just to this point, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I know that we're at our max at the 10 mil, but we've passed up some opportunities to get Clay Electric. Florida Power and Light is ready, but we haven't taken advantage of pressing that so that we can move forward with getting some of those so that we don't have to always, our property taxes are increased, and we're maxed out at the mill, so we have to get those additional revenue streams coming to our county. We have to have our fire risk. We need that, so we have to figure out a way that we can fund that so that we can move forward. When you think about 10 meals now and other surrounding counties at a lower meal, we have to see what we can do to minimize that pain for our constituents. So we just got to make the tough decision to do what we need to do, and that a part of that is getting some of those assessments that we need.
Well, and unfortunately, these assessments and everything that's going to have to be added is the only way that we'll ever be able to reduce the property taxes. So,
If we continue to provide the services that we provide.
right.
And that's at I think at a very high level for this county, in what we do. So, Mr. Cornegay, on the fire, we had already engaged with Bryant Miller and Olive years ago. Is that something that we can at least have that conversation with them, the consultant, to discuss not only the fire assessment, but also impact fees, and just try to figure out what that structure and framework would look like?
Yes, sir. As a matter of fact, I spoke with one of their representatives last week at Bryant Miller and Olive, and he told me he would send me an engagement letter. I have not received it yet, but it would include the work for a new fire assessment and also study for impact fees. So I anticipate getting that sometime this week.
Okay. And then, Mr. Clerk, to your point, I get people say all the time, they say, well, St. Johns County is only at 8.7 or whatever, but 8.7 mils on $1.5 million to $2 million piece of property is a whole lot different than 10 mils on $200,000 to $300,000 property. So
That's correct, and they have a lot higher assessments than we do too. MSTUs for all the new neighborhoods that come in, that helps pay for the fire departments when they build a 10,000 resident or 10,000 house neighborhood. They have MSTUs to pay for all that, and a credible amount of money flowing into the county besides the high property values.
Sure.
Right. Well, and just as a board, like I said, Mr. Cornegay contacted them, and just understand that there will be a consultant fee, correct? When they come and,
Yes, Madam Chairman, there will be, but they build that into the assessment, so it'll be a net zero for the county after the assessment goes
Right.
in force.
so, just to let you know that you're not shocked by that, but it is something that we're gonna have to do.
Okay. And Madam Chair, and also asking our manager, a few years back, I guess the counties and cities as well had a moratorium on impact fees due to the pandemic and disasters or whatever we were having, and also to encourage new businesses and development to occur. And so, being past that, it's the time to take a look at that again.
Yes, ma'am.
Madam Chair, just one last comment. I agree with everything that's said, but I think that we should move forward full steam with the franchise fee. I think that's the quickest revenue source that we can get coming in. And I truly believe that that's the option we need to go with now. That's also the fairest tax for all the citizens. Out of everything we discussed, that's definitely the fairest one. So I truly think we should move forward with the franchise fee as soon as possible. I mean, like ASAP. The other thing is the impact fees. I see it, most of the construction's going on in my end of the county. Every time I ride through there, I add up dollar signs, and we have given away thousands and thousands of dollars that, I mean, for one, we could have paid for the traffic light at 21 being 100, just off the impact fees for that area, or bought a new fire truck, or paved a couple roads where the new subdivision's going in. So we're just, we're wasting money. We're just totally wasting money by not getting those impact fees in place. And all it's gonna do is help our citizens, and it's not gonna hurt one bit for a $3,000 or $4,000 impact fee for every house. And if you go down there and ride through there, there's a lot of houses. I think, there's like 7 or 8 under construction right now. So, anyway, just something to think about. But the franchise fee, I'd like to see us move on it like today.
And as we've discussed in the past, we all thought that was the best method.
Yes.
It would be a little bit each month instead of an assessment at the end of the year. However, it was kind of halted when Clay Electric would not move forward with us. Now, since then, just the other day, Mr. Cornegay spoke with, she's the clerk in Baker County.
The Baker County manager, yes, ma'am, confirmed that the clerk mentioned earlier that they do indeed have a franchise fee agreement with Clay Electric. And by the way, I spoke with Mr. Pat Mundorf before this meeting, and he's going to assist us to arrange a meeting with Ricky Davis, either later this week or the first of next week,
Okay, good.
to go ahead and move this forward.
Okay, great. Well,
Thank
good. So
Great.
hopefully, and we all hope that that's the way we can go with it, so.
Thank
All right, any further discussion? All right, so we'll move on. Sheriff's report.
Gave y'all a copy of from Director Brad Witt, reference the water status, what's going on. He does a pretty good job with that. Usually emails you, but I want to make sure y'all had a copy of it. Coming out of the meeting, I was reading it this morning. Make sure you had it fresh off the press. The only thing I have pending is the approval of the Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Grant, the JAG program, which we do every year, Certificate of Participation for the fiscal year 2022. It's always a year behind.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the Edward Bryan Memorial Justice Assistance Grant?
Madam Chair, I'll make motion to approve the Edward Bryan Memorial Justice Assistance Grant.
Do I
I'll
have-
second the motion.
All right, any discussion? All right, so we'll take it a vote. Mr. Riddick,
Aye.
Mr. Daugherty,
Aye.
Mr. Thompson,
Aye.
Ms. Spooner,
Aye.
and Andrews, aye. Passes 5-0.
Thank you, that's all I have. Appreciate y'all.
Thank you.
Thank
County Manager.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I'd like to give you a quick update on the situation with the audit. We participated in a phone call with our auditors along with the clerk's office this past week and got an update. And we just want to let you know that, and the letter, the email that was a follow-up to that phone call is contained in your packet. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. Going forward, the tentative date for the audit presentation will be September 21st. Up until that date, we'll be having phone calls every other week with the auditors for a checkup on the status and how we're progressing. Some other information contained in the email you can see down below regarding the 4 constitutional officers have been completed, and the sheriff's audit is just now getting underway.
Okay.
All right. Item B, budget request from outside organizations. You have that spreadsheet in your packet. And our recommendation is to maintain last year's level of funding for the different agencies. So that we'll need action. We'll need a motion and a vote on that item.
Madam Chair, I'll offer a motion to approve it at the last year's level.
Okay,
Second.
all right. Any discussion? All right, so we'll vote. Mr. Riddick,
Aye.
Mr. Daugherty,
Aye.
Mr. Thompson,
Aye.
Ms. Spooner,
Aye.
and Andrews, aye. 5-0. Okay.
All right, thank you very much. And the next item is the pay raises. We asked the clerk's office to produce an estimate of what the increases would cost at 2%, 3%, 4%, and 5%. As the CFO mentioned earlier, the 5% increase would be a cost of around $140,000. So you have a sheet there in your packet that shows the 2%, the 3%, and the 4% as well. So we would need direction from you on how to proceed.
Okay. We have a motion to approve the raises at 2, 3, or 5?
Yes, I make a motion that we approve the raises at 5%.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All right, so we'll vote. Mr. Riddick,
Aye.
Mr. Daugherty,
Aye.
Mr. Thompson,
Aye.
Ms. Spooner,
Aye.
and Andrews, aye. 5-0.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item D is the approval of the collective bargaining agreement between the BOCC and the professional firefighters of Bradford County for a 3-year contract from October 1st, 2023 to September 30th, 2026.
So do I have a motion to approve the collective bargaining agreement?
I'll make a motion
Do we have a second?
Commissioner,
to approve the collection bargaining agreement.
thank you.
Do I have a second?
Yes, I'll make a second,
Okay,
so we can discuss this, thanks.
okay. Now we'll open it for discussion. Any discussion?
Yes, Madam Chair. Mr. Cornegay, and that was originally at 6%, and that was decreased to 2% on the,
Correct. One of the items that was negotiated was the step increase. For the first 4 years, the current contract allows for a 6% step raise. We negotiated that down to 2% per year.
So any further discussion? All right, so we'll put it to vote. Mr. Riddick?
Aye.
Mr. Daughtry?
Aye.
Mr. Thompson?
Aye.
Ms. Spooner?
Aye.
Andrews? Aye. Passes 5-0.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right. And approval to move forward with the FGEP result?
Madam Chair, if I may,
Okay,
I want to thank Chief Carter for his work on this negotiation, and also recognize our union leadership. It was it was tedious at first, and then we were able to get on the same page, and it was just a good negotiating experience all the way around. And Chief Carter is to be commended for that. So, thank you, Chief.
thank you, Chief.
all right.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Item E, approval to move forward with the FDEP Resilient Florida Grant for $300,000 for a vulnerability assessment. We've been granted or awarded this amount. All we need is approval to move forward with it.
Okay,
Madam Chair, I offer motion to move forward with the grant as stated by our manager.
okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? I do have a question. Is there any match to this, or?
No, ma'am, there's no match.
Okay. All right, so we'll put it to vote. Mr. Riddick?
Aye.
Mr. Daughtry?
Aye.
Mr. Thompson?
Aye.
Ms. Spooner?
Aye.
And Andrews, aye. 5-0. Okay,
That's all I have, Madam Chair.
all right. County Attorney?
Great, thank you.
Okay. Commissioners' comments. Who wants to start? Mr. Riddick, do you have anything?
I have nothing at this time, thanks.
Mr. Daughtry?
I don't have anything, thanks.
Mr. Thompson, do you have anything?
No.
Very little, but just to let you,
Saved you for last.
just to let you know that the hub has moved from New Bethel back to the community center on Old Lottie Road, so that the citizen will know where to go. And just encourage them to use our Career Resource Center that's open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Thank you.
All right, and I just thank everybody for being here. Thank you, all departments that are working on these budgets. I know it's a very tedious time, and just really appreciate your help. All right, and with that, we'll close the meeting. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.
I passed by the other day and I said, they've already moved there. I passed by and they had, I didn't get on the rest of the